of shows just for you. Before we get started, though, let's just take a minute and consciously think about what it is that we're connected to. What is it that you connect to give you your power or to give you your solace, to give you your peace? Think about it. It could be the tree outside your window, it could be the door, it could be God, it could be Allah, it could be the dude. But just think about that for a minute. Who is that? Let's take in a deep breath. Or what is that? All the way down deep and let that breath out with just a big ah. And just let your essence flow right up through your heart center, up through your throat chakra, and right out of your speaker box. Ah. And being as it's the beginning of the year, what I want you to think about now is those dreams, visions, and goals. What is it that you want to achieve this year? What is it that you want to bring into your world? Think about those. Taking a deep breath. Let that breath out with a big ah, along with those dreams, visions, and goals up through the heart center, throat chakra, and out through the speaker box into the universe. And for sure now, think about giving the universe, God, Allah, the dude, whatever it is you think gives you power. Think about the opportunity and providing that opportunity for it, they, she, whoever to make it come true for you. Oh, goodness. I'm full of myself this morning. Right, Jackie? Good to see you, my
Right.
friend. Oh, my
Hey,
goodness. I have missed you so. And
I
Mohammed.
know. We don't even see each other in person anymore. The only option we have is to see each other on these little
Well,
boxes.
she rattles my cage every once in a while. She'll say, "Hey, aren't you looking at the calendar? You already booked those dates." Don't
Yeah, we don't want to do any double booking.
we
That could
almost
be
did.
disastrous.
How are you, my friend? You ready for the new year? What's going on at the speakfeedlead.org project?
Well, the Speak Feed Lead project is looking at getting some new board members for 2021 to expand our reach and to welcome new ideas, new blood, new perspectives. So, and you might notice that I have a little friend with me today behind me. That's Newman.
Oh,
He's
a puppy dog.
he's a puppy dog. He had a bonded mate named Paisley, whom we lost the day after Christmas.
Aw.
And Newman's been a little bit depressed and lost since her passing. So he's coming with me most everywhere these days.
See,
so that he doesn't
that is one way
stay
that
alone.
we stay connected because I knew that, and we know that because of Facebook, right? So all I got to do is just watch my feed, and I know what Jackie's doing. So it's very good.
In other words, you're a spy.
Stalker.
Of course, we all are on Facebook and social media. I guess we're all watching everybody else's lives.
For a thing like that to change our world like it has, it's just amazing. And I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent. I think that it's either going to be man's greatest achievement or his greatest downfall. But I think we're working out the details, and I think we're learning, some of the good uses for it. It's just
Yeah.
it's crazy how it just has taken over our life, and it's in such a short span. It blows me away.
Yeah, it has. It's only been 20 years or something since the advent of the internet, and yet it pretty much controls everything we do now.
Well, I
So
mean, Facebook's a little over 10 years, I think. I think it was like,
I think it's older than that.
I'm thinking 2009, 2008.
Yep.
I think that's when I got it.
Really?
Anyway.
Hmm. Okay.
Cool. Well, are you ready for today's show? I want to remind the
Yeah, this
listeners
should be
that
good.
today's show page is at www.lifemasteryradio.net or .com. Either one, you can go there. Any links that we talk about on the show today with our wonderful guest will be right there. And later on this week, Jackie will post a blog post on her take on the show, and she does a great job. And then she also takes care of the newsletter. She lets us know who's been on the show, who's coming on the show, and a little bit about her blog post. So while you're visiting lifemasteryradio.net or .com, sign up for that newsletter. The only thing we use that email address for is the newsletter. And what else
And
can
it's
we
really
do?
easy. Actually, what you could do right now is you could take out one of these darn smartphones that we all have, right? and text Life Mastery Radio to 22828. 22828. And then you just text Life Mastery Radio, and then we'll gather your information right there from your phone while you're listening to the show, and you'll be subscribed to the newsletter. It's that easy. And then you'll start getting information about our upcoming guests, like Todd said. It's really easy that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a Facebook page. So go and check out our Facebook page. All of the shows are there. There's a live watch party right now that you can eventually go and look at or share or whatever. You know what? It's so complicated that I just like doing the show. That's why I'm here. There's a lot to do.
Just come to chat with people.
I get to hang out with some really cool people on the cutting edge of empowerment, self-improvement, all of that fun stuff, neat stuff that makes people happy and gives them a reason to find their passion, what they're interested in, find their voice. And we're going to talk about that today. Are you ready, Jackie? You're introducing, right?
I am, and I am honored to do so because Janelle and I are fairly new acquaintances. And yet the more we talk, the more we find out that we have a lot in common. So she is a confidence coach for women entrepreneurs and leaders. She's also an author and a speaker. And what Janelle does is she leads women through her STAR, STAR process of self-discovery, personal transformation, and growth so that they can create a fearless confidence in who they are and what they do. This life-changing process results in new levels of success, satisfaction, and engagement in the lives of her clients. Janelle also has a book coming out soon that's called She's Taking Center Stage: How to Be the Star of Your Own Story. Doesn't that sound intriguing? She chronicles her story of emerging from past sexual trauma to a place of fearless confidence, which highlights this STAR, STAR process that she has. And she discovered how to be confidently fearless through this process. And that's why I'm excited to talk to her today, because many of our listeners know that I also come from a sexual trauma background. And this is an interesting thing I discovered as I was beginning to heal. My counselor sent me to this group that was a support group that was all women of sexual survivors, right? And I walk into this first meeting and there's 15 women in this room, and I know about 5 of them. I knew a third of these women. None of us knew that we were all suffering from the same trauma, and we're at the point of starting to begin the healing process. And so I know how empowering it is to be with women who are trying to heal and trying to improve and engage together in different ideas. And during that process, we actually helped one of those survivors work through multiple personalities and integrate all of those personalities back into her core self. And what an amazing experience that was. So I am very happy to have Janelle here today to talk about what she does and how she empowers women. And she's a superstar who's going to take you, if you're a woman entrepreneur, to that superstar status as well. So please welcome our guest today, Janelle Anderson. How are you, Janelle?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great today.
Awesome. And so what do you tell us about your experience and how you got to do what you're doing today?
So, well, it's a long story, but I'll try to shorten it.
We got time.
That's like a big question right there. Well, I was raised in a very big family. So 8 kids. I was the first girl, kind of the pioneer for the other girls in the family. And my mom was so busy with all these children. She wasn't paying as much attention. So I ended up kind of getting into some situations, even as a young teenager, with boys that wasn't cool. And she found out about it and got a hold of it and kind of set me straight. But then when I was 16, I had a boyfriend who actually was killed. It was the Vietnam era. So he had been, what's the word? I can't even think of the word. Drafted. Yes. Anyway, so that set me on this course from there of just being really hidden away. I kind of like shut down a lot emotionally from that. And then I went off to college and was, I don't know if you wanted me to go into my trauma story, but here I am.
It's
So,
as good a place as any.
Yeah. 19 years old, went out with my roommate out one night and I kind of woke up hours later in my bed with this man on top of me, actually raping me, but I didn't realize at the time what had happened. And the first thing I thought of I blacked out. Next morning, I woke up thinking, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I allow it to happen to me? I must have drank too much, even though I didn't drink, or, taken some too much. I was, smoking pot maybe or something. So immediately I blamed myself for that. And that set me, or I was already in this place of still like, wounded and healing from my boyfriend dying. And then this happened. And it really just, you talk about those multiple personalities. It really just shut me down to this place, like a fog, I call it. And I didn't get help. I didn't talk about it. I didn't know what to do. I thought it was me. Something was wrong with me. At 19 years old, I remember a couple of days later seeing this guy on campus. I had known him from a distance. I didn't know him personally, but I knew who he was. And he just walked right past me like I didn't exist. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, I must be just nothing, And I had put on some weight because I was emotionally eating after the loss of my boyfriend. And so that all piled on top of. So talk about not having any confidence at all. And having grown up in a big family, it was hard to be heard. So I didn't, if I spoke up, I'd be interrupted or overlooked or, all this stuff, kind of all these experiences began to create for me this thought that, or belief that I wasn't worthy, I wasn't important, I didn't matter, nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. And so then that set me on this course of just, and I know this happens a lot with trauma victims, is you just kind of get, free and easy. You just kind of like, you're looking desperately for somebody to love you. You're looking desperately for somebody to accept you and to make you feel like you have worth and value. And so we moved from Virginia to Colorado in the middle of that. And I was in college there, and just kind of passed around through the football team and ended up getting pregnant. I actually had a good boyfriend in the middle of all that who was really a great guy, but I ended up getting pregnant, had an abortion. I didn't want the abortion, so that added on more trauma. And then I meet this guy at the end of that. And I was in this place, if you can imagine, of complete vulnerability and just like, and he was one of these people that could spot that and kind of swept in. He was very charismatic. Yeah, very had his all his what do you call it, like language together. Like he knew how to reel in women, to
he was a player. Sounds like he was a player.
He was a player, and he was I think narcissistic, and just he told me many years later that he in high school would plan out all these conversations in his head so that he could have multiple girlfriends at the same time. And he would plan out all his conversations. If she asked me this, I'll tell her this. So he was like,
wow.
Yeah. Anyway, I just fell right into that. And at that time, I just graduated from college. I barely made it through because of everything going on inside of me. But I was living in this fog. I was really in a fog and didn't have any idea what was going on, just kind of going through the motions, trying to survive. And he says, let's go out to California because I don't want to live here anymore. He didn't have a job. He didn't have a car. I had the car. I couldn't find a job teaching at the time. There weren't any. So I said, okay, whatever, let's just go. So we're driving out to California, and on the way he said, let's stop in Las Vegas and just check it out. So we stop in Las Vegas, and he decides, maybe we should live here for a while, but we need jobs. Why don't you go get a job? So I go find a job in a casino as a change girl. I walked around with this change belt around my waist. And then I got a job as a substitute teacher. So at least I was trying to get back on my path. And then he decides, you know what? You are so beautiful. You could make so much more money. You don't need to work for minimum wage. Why don't you go out and what they called be a working girl? Is what they called it at the time. And you could make hundreds of dollars, because of your beauty. And he took me out shopping, dressed me all up, just the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
Inside, I was like, I don't want to do this. I was by then 23, I think. I don't want to do this. But remember the state I was in, I was so desperate to be loved that I was willing to do whatever. It was just almost like this emotional, mental slavery bond kind of a thing is the best way I can use. But at the time I thought, well, there's something wrong with me and how terrible of me to be doing this, but I did it. And so I spent 3 years in Las Vegas as a prostitute and felt trapped in this life. Like, I'll never get out of this. And I'm just a nobody. And who's going to ever want me? I'm ruined for life. That was my mindset. And, I started doing more drugs, mainly just to get through, cocaine and Quaaludes, basically, to get myself up and to, go to sleep at night, and just living in this place of feeling trapped and alone and lost. And I remember sitting there one day wondering, why did this happen? How did I get to this place in my life? I had a really good family. My parents loved me. I was raised with morals, right? And again, it came back to, well, there's something wrong with me. I've let myself do this. I've put myself here. This is, and he would just pile on to that. Like, it was me.
Yeah.
It wasn't something he did, And then after about 3 years, it was getting to this place of desperation, and we were fighting and arguing, and he actually began to get, he wasn't really physically violent any of that time, but this one night he did. I was on the floor and he was choking me, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to kill me. But he stopped and he ran out of the house because he realized, I guess, what he was doing. Well, I called my mom and was just weeping, and she did not know. They didn't know what I was doing.
Wow.
And she prayed with me and said, they had become Christians at the time. I was raised a Catholic. And she prayed with me and said, Jesus wants you to come home and be at peace. So the word peace and home, those two words were like this magnet to me. Like, yeah, I was like, I need that. I don't know what it is, but I need it. So I prayed with her and immediately felt a difference. I felt a presence come into me. And I tell people this is like from the head down. I mean, it was just, I didn't know what was happening. It wasn't like, but it just happened. And all of a sudden I knew, okay, I'm not going to go out on the street again. I'm not going to do this anymore. I've somehow had the strength to resist him and to stand up to him. Yeah.
Wow.
And then after that, we moved back east, and I went home to my parents' house, and he went up to Pennsylvania where he was from. And we were apart for about a year, but I was still under that. Spell. It's a good way to put it. And he would call me, and he ended up telling me, well, I'm a Christian now too, so let's get married. And my mom kept trying to talk me out of it, but I felt like, well, who else is going to want me if I'm ever going to want to get married? And so I ended up marrying him, and on my wedding night felt like, oh my gosh, what have I done? It was like disaster. It was like a nightmare. Like, oh, I can't believe I'm connected to him again. It was horrible. But about a year and a half later, I became pregnant and had my one and only daughter, who's fantastic and wonderful. And a few years after that, we ended up divorcing, and he moved back to Las Vegas, and we've actually lost touch with him over the years. He's kind of dropped out of sight, but he gave me this wonderful daughter. So she was worth all of that to really.
Yeah.
So at what point did you wake up from this nightmare? I mean,
yeah, good question. So
I have to imagine that a lot of this experience is because, and who has made you who you are today too.
Yes. And that's something I did not realize until my 50s. So this happened in my 20s. I became a Christian. I started going to church. I started really feeling at peace, and I knew I was forgiven, but it was kind of like this blanket forgiveness. I didn't do any of the inner work to dig into it or to process what had happened to me. And so I was still living in a fog in a way. I always describe it as kind of the outer. I was outside. I wasn't connected to my inside. And so when I would tell people, my story, or, somebody would ask me for my testimony, as they say, I couldn't tell them.
Right.
Because what would they think? Right.
Yeah.
And it was my daughter's father. And so I didn't want her to know. And so I never would. And so I was very disconnected from the whole thing. I felt like if I just stuff it away and forget about it, it'll go away. And that's how I lived for 30 some years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then when I was in my 50s, this is when my awakening, I started to wake up to, oh my gosh, I'm in my 50s. Where has my life gone? What do I want to do now? And I kept hitting up against this wall of feeling that disconnection and finally becoming aware of something isn't quite right here. And so I decided, it took me a while, but I decided I'm going to do something about it. And I knew that meant I had to do that inner work. I had to start facing my past. And I didn't want to, because I still was covered with this shame of, I caused this. I let it happen. And my church has this ministry that really helps people do this inner healing and dig down deep. And so I finally went to one of these sessions, and it's 2 people with the person, and they help you work through things and talk things out and pray through things. And the one woman asked me, the one session I went to, I knew I needed to talk about the rape, only I didn't know it was a rape. I thought it was a one-night stand where I lost my virginity, like, all that shame. But I knew I needed to talk about it. And I thought, well, why? That was so long ago. What difference does that make? But for some reason, I need to talk about this. And I totally thought it was irrelevant. I really did.
Well, you convinced yourself.
Not realizing it was the foundation to everything, right?
It was the core. Yeah, it was everything. And that still amazes me. But for 30 some years, this was how I thought. And honestly, I didn't think much about it. I just kind of stuffed it away and didn't try to think about it. So anyway, in this session, I said to her, I think I'm supposed to tell you what happened when I was 19. So I describe it to her, and she's like, it sounds like you were drugged and raped. And I was like, what? It was like a shock. And that still amazes me that after 30, I think it was like 35 years, it's a shock to me that I had been drugged and raped. It never occurred to me in all those years. And so I went back home that night and I looked up on the internet what it would be like if you were drugged. And sure enough, as I'm reading this description, I'm like, that's exactly how I remember that night. Oh my gosh, I was drugged and raped. But it came out. It came to the light in my consciousness. And once that happened, it was kind of like, I always describe it as, those rubber band balls. And I thought if I have to go through all this stuff, it's going to take forever. But it was like a laser beam going to the core of it, and it all just kind of fell apart.
Wow.
And I began to work through these things and face them and deal with them and talk about them. And in that process, I realized it wasn't me. It wasn't that there was something wrong with me. I was a victim. I had been taken advantage of. And so I worked through a lot of forgiveness for all these men, for all the things that I even had to really work on forgiving myself, which was huge, but also kind of owning the story that I had tried to ignore. That was a huge part of my awakening.
So what would you tell people, women, or what do you tell women that have this? I mean, this has to be a common story. I've heard it before, and I know of people, and it happens. And so what is your one message that you would tell people?
Yeah, it is all too common, definitely. I think the one message I would say is don't be afraid to talk about it and to look at it.
And how healing was that for you? It had to have been just like cracking an egg open.
Oh, it was.
Beep, 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 here, I'm reborn.
Well, one of the things where I knew I was getting healed was all those years I had a really hard time feeling any emotion about anything. Because when you go through sexual trauma, you disassociate. And years of, the prostitution, I just hundreds of times disassociated, right? And when you do that, you shut down all your emotions. You can't feel anything. And that was really what triggered me to do the work, because I realized there's something wrong. I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I want to feel again. And my girlfriends would cry over everything and say, I'm sorry, I cry over everything. And I'd be like, I wish I could.
Yeah. That too is a common story, I think. And it doesn't always happen just because of sexual trauma, but I think that so many women lose, for many different reasons and in many different ways, they lose their identity. They lose that sense of worth, of value. And that, because we are women and all of those things are so connected to an emotional sense of ourselves, that we do stop feeling. And that even makes us feel more shame, because we separate ourselves from other people because we're not like everybody else, right? I mean, that was always something I felt, was that I couldn't form real deep friendships because I was just different. There was nobody else that could relate to me, and no one else thought the same ways I did. And so it was hard for me to make those really close relationships, throughout high school and everything. And so this is not just it sounds to me like your programs are not just, hey, let's help you get on stage and really talk, whatever you want to say, but this is actually healing women deep inside to find that sense of themselves, that identity that perhaps they've lost or misplaced somehow.
Yeah.
And let's figure out who you really are.
Yes.
And once you know that, the confidence just will automatically come, right? Because that healing can happen so quickly. I mean, it's not overnight, but in the big scheme of things, it might feel that way. Because like you said, when you're diagnosed properly with a disease, now you finally know how to treat it. And that's what happened with you in that session, when you realized this was a rape. Now there's the disease. Now you know how to heal it. And it makes such a difference. It doesn't take away the work necessary to do all the healing, but at least now you know what the diagnosis and the treatment look like. Right?
Exactly.
So this sounds like really empowering work. Do you have any stories about clients you've worked with that have gone through your process and have come out on top in some way?
Oh, I have lots of stories. Definitely. I have one recently that just last night I had to really applaud and cheer her on, because she had just gone through my course called Fearless Confidence Formula. And I've been actually working with her for years now, several years, but she has a lot of stuff in her past too, just anxiety disorders and things like that, but really just plagued by these thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I have nothing to offer. And she became a coach several years ago, but hasn't launched her business because of that. And so she said last night, now I can talk, I can actually see, somebody told her the other day that she had all these things to offer and all this goodness in her. And she was like, I can finally say yes without feeling prideful or boastful, but just kind of like, yes, these are the good things in me. Whereas before she would always feel like, no, I nobody wants to listen to me. I don't have anything, all that stuff was going on before. And that was the first time I actually saw her shine and be that star. And it is that confidence just naturally comes. You actually create confidence by doing this work. And I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but your experiences actually create the behaviors and the thoughts and the beliefs often that you have. So the experiences that I had created this lack of confidence, is no confidence. And so working through all of that, it's like peeling off these layers of things that aren't you, the picture.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just thinking, let's drill down into this and the real nuts and bolts of it. And basically what I'm hearing and understanding, and what I know, I'm a life coach too, certified by two different people.
Mhm.
is what, and what I'm hearing is that it's owning your story is the major component to the
Major.
healing process.
It
And
is
and
because
and just owning and being a part of that and realizing that's not really you, but that's your story.
well, it's what happened to me, but it doesn't mean that's who I am.
And
Right. And being
Right.
able to look at what happened to me instead of ignoring it and covering it up and feeling ashamed for it. This takes off the shame. It opens it up, and you're looking at it going, oh, just like all these other people, these things have happened to all of us.
so you described your process in dealing, and I know you've dealt with clients.
Yeah.
How easy is that? Is that easy? Is it easy to crack that egg? Is it a little complicated, or is everybody different?
Well, everybody is different. And I wouldn't describe it as easy or hard. It is just a process.
Right.
And depending on the person, it could take no time at all, or it could take years. It took me several years actually to fully work through all this stuff. But it wasn't what I was worried about. The reason I tried to resist going there is I thought it would be really painful. I thought it would be really hard. I thought it would be really just torturous. But it wasn't, because I had the people around
That's what I
me.
was getting at.
They were there to support me. There was no judgment. There was no, oh my gosh, why'd you let that happen? Nothing like that. I was able to unpack it all, look at it, and go, oh, that wasn't the scary monster under the bed that I thought it was going to be,
Yeah. That's
and
funny
then,
you say that, because Jackie wrote a speech, The Scary Monster.
oh, really?
Or, no, The Scary Monster in the Hallway, wasn't it?
That wasn't me.
Somebody.
Somebody
well.
did, but it wasn't me.
Somebody.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, Todd. It was a little part of my speech. Yeah, that when my abuser would come in at night, it was, yeah, I could hear
Scary
his
Monster from the
I could
Hallway.
hear his
or something.
ankles cracking in the hallway, and I called him a monster because I was relating it to fairy tales.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I know what you're talking about now. You're right. Yeah.
You had me going there for a minute. I thought I dreamt. No.
You're like, I thought it was you.
Yeah. Well, Janelle, I was gonna say that as a coach myself, I also work with some clients, and there's been a couple of times when we're trying to kind of find their story and help them to develop that into an inspiring message, but it's evident in some cases that they've not healed enough from their life experiences where they're ready
Right.
to do the work that I'm helping them to do. And so there's been a few times I've had to say, you know what, you've got to go seek professional help before you and I can work together, because
That's very smart.
there's
Yeah.
so much anger, so
Yeah.
much angst and pain that's still there that I'm not qualified to help them with. Have you experienced anything like that as well? Or is your work a little more deeper perhaps than what I do?
You mean, have I experienced it with my clients?
Yeah, have you started working with someone that you realize, whoa, there's
you-
too much work to do in a different area before
Somebody
I
that you
can
had to
really
refer, I think, is what
help
she's
them?
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple times. If I'm not able to move them forward at all, and they just keep staying in this one place,
Circle.
no matter what we do, and then I will refer them to therapy. But if most of the time, though,
Isn't it about
haven't
isn't
had
it about feeling safe
yeah, a big part of it
and
is.
feeling comfortable and feeling that
Yeah.
you trust this person and you can. I know for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, finding a sponsor
Mhm.
was critical in my story being coming out of me and being just dissected and looked at, and why did I do this and why did I act that way and da 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 da. But it was that I trusted and actually honored that person to be able to tell them the things that were in here that were locked up.
Oh yeah, there's got to be trust. I remember sitting in before all this happened. I had just started attending this church and sitting here in a women's group and hearing them just tell their stories and be open and just let it all out. And I remember thinking, aren't they afraid they're going to be like judged and talked about? Like, I can't believe they're saying all this. And over time, I realized that it was such a safe place that the leadership of this church had created, because they taught everyone all about, judgment and how how that comes back to you. And, so nobody really judged. And it was such a safe place to share. And everyone was able to get it all out in the open, knowing that this was a safe place, and then process through it. And there were people all around that understood and that would hold the space for you and just hold you, and
I got that question a lot, Janelle. When I let my book fly, here's a shameless plug. Da, 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 6 Weeks Life Master.
Awesome.
But when I let my book fly and people were reading it, they're like, Todd, how can you talk about those things? How can you just aren't you worried about what people are going to think? And it's like, no, I've already been through that process and I know the healing power, and I'm an open book. Here's my story. I hope that you learn something from it, is my whole philosophy.
Yeah. So when I finally got to that point, it was like such a feeling of freedom. I talk about it as going like from 2 feet small to 10 feet tall, because the first time I actually shared my story openly in public, it was in a women's retreat at my church. So I felt very safe doing it. I was one of the teachers. And I thought, you know what? Today's the day. I'm going to tell them. I just told them a little bit. And I went back to my seat afterwards and felt like I had grown 10 feet tall because all this weight had been lifted and it was out in the open. And instantly on the heels of that came these thoughts like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. What are they going to think of you? Nobody's going to want to be your friend. But then right after that, throughout the weekend, women kept coming up to me and thanking me for being open and vulnerable and allowed them to be. And then I realized, yeah, I could breathe again. And from then on, it's been, I can write about it finally. In my book, I've written about it and talk about it without any of those emotions like you were talking about, Jackie. And I think that's one of the ways you are healed, is that you don't have that emotional reaction to it anymore.
Well, and that's why it's so powerful to find your voice. And that's, I use that phrase a lot, and it's sort of a buzzword or buzz phrase that's out there right now. But that's really what it's about, is that once you heal enough to be able to talk about it, that's the final step. I think that's that one step when you realize I can actually put words to my experience and to my emotion. I can let those out, whether it's verbally or in a book or something like that. But I think verbally really is the part of it when you speak on stage about something like that. And that's when other people now feel confident to come and talk to you about their own experiences, because they get you, they understand you, and they've connected with you. And
that's the witness aspect of it, right? That's
yeah.
And because I could tell you, I knew Jackie for a couple of years, and I heard her deliver this speech that talked about this experience. I was blown away, and I felt even more connected to her because now I knew a part of her story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. It creates connection. It creates a safe place. It gives permission to others to be real and to let down their guard. Like you were saying before, Todd, like it's hard to talk about things if you think that somebody's going to judge you.
Mm-hmm.
Then and I don't share this just with anybody. I share it in places where I feel like it's a safe place, and I feel that it's a good place for the message to go out that I have, because not every audience can hear it, and not every situation is appropriate to share it.
Right.
But
well, when a speaker is vulnerable, and vulnerability is about being authentic and being transparent and honest, right? And so when you're vulnerable, now you are approachable to people because you're a human being. You're not someone up there preaching, you should do this and this and this because I did this and this and this, but now you're real, and they recognize that you're a person who's been through experiences that might be really relatable to them. Maybe for the first time, they're finding someone that could possibly understand how they're feeling. And I wanted to point out another thing to you that I don't know if you've recognized yet. Probably you have, in that experience when you realize, oh my gosh, I had been raped. Well, have you ever considered the idea that you were also trafficked? By this young man that you went to Las Vegas with? I mean, he was trafficking you.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is I did not realize that until just in the last few years. And the other thing that was, I remember I had to say this over and over to myself, like, oh my gosh, I've experienced a bunch of trauma.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I
But
just thought
what
that was
kept
life.
you going, Janelle? Because there's a point when there's all this trauma and it's piled on you, and a lot of people choose to take their lives because they can't deal with the pain anymore and they don't want to deal with the pain. It seems more painful to bring it out than to just live with what's inside of you. So what was it? For me, I always felt like something was telling me that if I live through this, I'm going to be a really strong person, and there's a purpose in that.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it? What was that inner voice saying to you that kept you going even after all these experiences kept piling on top of each other, creating more and more loss and more shame and more sadness? What was it that kept you going?
Well, as I said, I became a Christian at the end of that. And so I think it was just that knowing that, okay, I am loved. Because those words, peace and home, like they became a reality. I felt it, and I knew that I was created for a purpose, and I knew I was loved. And I did a lot of things in those 30 years that were in line with following a purpose. I started leading worship. I taught Bible studies. A lot of my gifts did come out to a degree, but I always felt like there was some level of like being held back still, because I wasn't totally like out on center stage.
Not
And
totally real, right?
no,
You
I
weren't
wasn't totally real yet. Yeah. And
kind
I
of
could
fakey
feel
and
it.
kind of, yeah.
I could feel it in my friendships too, that intimate, I couldn't quite get really connected deeply.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what kept me going, though, is just my faith and my family and the support and my daughter, raising my daughter, and teaching school, like all those things gave me a lot of fulfillment. But when I hit my 50s, and a lot of people talk, that's that time of life where you're like, wait a minute,
It's the new 30s.
wait, where did all those
These are the
years
new
go?
30s.
Yeah. And I got married again. My current husband, we've been married 30 years.
Wow.
And we had a ministry together with teenagers. And so there was a lot of things that I was able to do throughout those years. But when I hit my 50s, and the ministry was shut down. I wasn't teaching anymore. We had a business, that a lot of stuff had happened. And now I was at this place of, now what,
Mm.
and what is my purpose? Like, it really was that sense of like, what can I do? What do I want to do? What was I created to do for the rest of my life that's going to make an impact? And that's when I realized, if I'm going to really make an impact, I have to connect, back to that story, because it did have an influence on who I am today. I mean, it just did. I can't not include it. It's just,
Well, and that's a great segue to this program that you have coming up, which is called Conquering the Imposter Within.
yes.
And that's where that imposter comes in, right? Is that sometimes we feel like, okay, now I understand my story and I have something to say, but there's still part of you that feels like it's not authentic, it's not real, that maybe you're just saying things that people want to hear rather than what you really want to say.
Right.
And so tell us a little bit about this course coming up, and how do you help women overcome that or conquer that imposter?
So one thing, I talk a lot about confidence and fearless confidence, because I feel like without that, you're not going to be able to, build your business or find the success you truly want. You'll be hiding behind stage a lot of the
Quick
time.
question, just it's flowing in out of that blue place. So you talk about this awakening at 50, but when did you discover that fearless confidence, and what was the driver behind that?
So it was later, it was this process. So I discovered, okay, now it took me a while to figure out that I wanted to become a coach, but I had made this decision. Okay, I'm going to find whatever it is and I'm going to do it, because time's a wasting here. And I want to get on it here. So I found coaching. I went through coach training. I was still hiding behind the stage. I was still very timid. I still didn't have confidence. In fact, my mentor coach kept saying, Janelle, be fearless. That's where the fearless came from. Be fearless. And I had this moment where I realized I'm being timid. I'm shrinking back. I'm playing small. And I've actually been doing this my whole life. And so I needed to figure out how to stop doing that. And a part of the inner healing with my church was a part of it, but then becoming a coach and going through the coach training and learning to tell my story, and then working with other women and seeing, oh my gosh, this is like a common theme with women, and finding your voice and speaking and sharing your heart through, whether it's writing or just in conversation. Like so many women don't, because they think, oh, I'm not worth it. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. I don't think that I have the credibility, all these things that come up, and the imposter syndrome shows up. I'm a fraud. They're going to find out. And so the more that I dug into that and research and working with women, the more I see these common threads. And I started looking back through my journals. I've been journaling since I was like 30, since all this happened. And I saw this like progression that I was going through to get to where I am now, where I'm fearlessly confident. And I'm like, what did I do? And so that's where the star comes from. And even in this webinar that I'm going to be doing on January 18th, I dig a little bit into what I've come up with as a process. There's actually a process to this. And it's not like a quick fix. Hey, in an hour or 2 weeks, I'm going to be there. You have to be willing to do some of the inner work for this fearless confidence to show up in your life.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
That's something I've always considered. I've been through 2 life coaching programs, but here's the deal, Janelle, and this is something I've formulated. This is my theory. The person that benefits the most from life coaching is the coach.
Yes.
Right?
It's true.
Because you go through all these processes, you learn all these processes that then you are to teach to others, and you get so involved in them that it's just magic. It's like a magic potion. You just drink it and it's like,
right. And to me, it's like, it's ongoing. I'm always growing and learning more.
totally. Well,
right?
If you're on that cutting edge of self-improvement and self-empowerment, I've been doing this show for like 12 years or something, and everybody has their own theories and they put their own, I don't want to give energy to spin, but they just tweak it a little bit that other people can grasp the concepts and the ideas. And that's what Life Mastery Radio is all about, because I get to interview and talk and stay in the groove with those people that are on the cutting edge like you.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
right.
Yeah.
Another shameless plug there.
So I don't want to ask you to reveal any secrets, but are you comfortable sharing what STAR stands for?
Sure.
The acronym.
Yeah. So S is stirring up your soul. And that's that waking up, like what is going on? It's that awareness. Because I think most people, if they haven't done this self-improvement kind of work, are not very aware of really what's happening inside. They're just kind of going through their motions and going through life. So it's waking up, it's stirring up your soul and starting to ask yourself, what do I believe in? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And is it really what I want to do? And then that moves quickly into what I call the T is truth telling. What is the truth? And what are the lies I've been believing? What are those things I need to peel away that are holding me back and not serving me? So there's that deep inner work, starting to, look at lies or limiting beliefs, or, let's talk about your past if we need to. I mean, not everybody has trauma in their past, but everybody has something.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I hear that sometimes too. Oh, I don't have anything to talk about. I don't have,
yes, yeah. And so in that is, there's a lot in there, and you might have to do some forgiving. It's huge. Forgiveness is so huge. So I talk a lot about that. And then the A, once you've kind of gone through that, you're ready now to accept that acceptance, that owning your story. Like I felt like I was able to embrace all of me for the first time ever in my life, and then start to take some action. Then I'm able to actually set goals. I never could set goals in my whole life because I didn't know what I wanted or who I was, and start to do things that used to scare me, like speak on a stage, or, I started doing workshops and getting in front of people. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I really want to do this, but I'm really scared, but I'm going to go into the library and I'm going to ask them if I can do a free workshop for women and see what they say. Like I was taking action.
Right.
And then that leads into, the more you do that, the more confidence you build, because you're also taking the action, but you've done the inner work. They go together. You've got to do both. If you try to just do the inner work and never take action, you won't really realize your full potential. If you just do the action without doing the inner work, you're going to hit up against those barriers.
Yeah, the action actually puts you in the flow
Yes.
of opportunity
Yes.
from your higher power, or whatever it is that you
Yes.
believe in, or whatever it is that you've been praying about. And you've got to take that step in order to put you in the flow of the opportunity.
And flow is the R. The R is release, the river within, like the river within. I remember one time in church, I went up for prayer and the guy says, "You draw from the river within, don't you?" And that just like hit me. I was like, huh. And it just has stuck with me. And I realized that that's where flow comes from, is that river within, who you truly are, like really knowing who you truly are, whether you believe in God or a higher power, whatever your belief is, like you have a river within, which is your true self, right? And when you're in the flow of that and it's flowing, it's like a river. I think about rivers flow and they go wherever they go and they touch everything in their path, and they're life-giving. And, it's just a flow. It's not striving, and it's powerful. So that's my star.
Nice. I like it.
Oh my goodness, ladies. We only have about 4 minutes left.
Oh my gosh, where'd the time go?
Well, did I meet your expectation, Janelle? Did you have a blast?
I have had a blast. I had no idea I was going to go through all of that. But
well, you know what? It was what was supposed to come out. That's the way
right.
we do it. Are there any last minute thoughts that you have? We build this show out as talking about being real and confidence, and I think we hit on a couple of those a little bit. And
make sure you tell people how to find your program.
Yes.
I definitely want to make sure that you'll come back, because I think there's a lot more to talk about.
Oh, I would love to come back, and there is a lot more.
Jackie, put her on the schedule.
You can find my my webinar on my website. It's emerginglifecoaching.com/webinar. And it'll be, like I said, January 18th. And I'm going to talk about some of the process, and what are some of the key things? What are some of the main challenges women have around feeling confident, and some secrets and a process that, from that webinar, I think people can begin the process. There'll be a couple of takeaways from that webinar that they can actually do to start building that confidence.
Well, if somebody shows up that looks like me wearing a wig, you won't blow my cover, will you?
You are more than welcome. I have worked with men. I just don't focus on it. I had a guy come to a workshop once and he said, "Would you work with me, please?"
Oh,
sure. Absolutely.
That's cool. Well,
yeah. I think sometimes we forget that men have had a lot of these same traumas.
Absolutely.
I didn't wake up and smell the roses until I discovered my feminine side. So it was
there you go.
It was huge. It was a big deal. And I think that's a lot of what your process has, the ability for guys to figure out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. We're down to 2 minutes. Thank you, Janelle, so much for showing up as you today, sharing your story. What an amazing story. And it can do nothing but open doors and turn on the lights for others.
Oh, absolutely. I hope so.
Jackie,
thank you for having me.
Did you learn anything new? You got that big smile. Your cheeks are rosy. The eyes are wide open and bright. Oh my gosh.
Well, I learned a few things, that to really heal and to become empowered with our own voice, we need to find some trust in others, somebody that we can trust. There's got to be some spiritual guidance there somewhere. Journaling is a good tool to help us think through some of those processes. Consistent work and growth, and be open to opportunities such as people like Janelle, who have these programs that can really help you now put everything together and take off in a whole new direction. So I'm excited for you, Janelle.
Oh my goodness. If you got all that, I can hardly wait to read the blog.
I know, me too.
What did I miss? No, thanks again, Janelle, for showing up as you. This has been a great show. Tell your friends about Life Mastery Radio. What a cool show. We just had a blast.
Yeah.
And your friends need to know about it too. So let them know where they can find us and how they can connect with us. Lastly, here's the deal. I would really appreciate it if you all would make it a great day. Why? Because it's all about choice. And you can choose to live a great life filled with confidence and be fearless. If you want to know more, find Janelle's website and check it out. That's all we have time for today. Bye-bye.
Bye,
friends. See you
everybody.
next week.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Yes.
Woohoo. Forgot that part.